Hey there, welcome to South Bound, brought to you by saas.group. I'm your host, Anna Dana, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business a success. And today with me is Johnathan Bell, co founder and CEO at License One, the hub for SMEs to detect their software subscriptions, prevent wasted spend, and manage employee excesses. They have a tiny team of four. They're based in France, and in 3 years since their launch, they have already helped hundreds of companies completely change the way they manage their subscriptions. So it's super excited to have you here and learn about everything you do.
Thanks. Great to be here, Anna.
Awesome. Okay. Well, and first of all, I always do the research before I meet with my guests. And I thought, okay, well, you're based in France, so you're going to have a French accent. And then I found your only podcast that you did. And the host starts saying, well, Jonathan is from Scotland. And I'm like, oh God, I'm screwed. Because
Yeah, yeah. If I was on this podcast maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you might have been, but I kind of had to learn to lose my accent over the past little while. The the French
okay.
already and their English isn't so good, but no, I arrived in I arrived in France something like it must have been 6 7 years ago. I'd done a study abroad with Erasmus, and then I went a little bit everywhere across Europe, and then I ended up settling down on a coastal town called La Rochelle, and that's where License One was founded.
Okay. No, it's just like it was a painful experience for me. In my university, I had an accounting teacher from Scotland, and I just have to say, I failed accounting. So
Well, if you want me to go back to my old accent, I can do it, but I don't think that's going to be good for the people listening.
all right. But anyway, yeah, jokes aside, it's great to have you here. And let's maybe get into your background a little bit. How did you end up with License One and doing what you're doing?
So for all my career, I sort of worked in SaaS. It wasn't really by choice. I just fell into it by luck. When I was saying in my study abroad, I was in Lyon, and one of my professors offered me an internship at this small startup in
Wait a second. What university is it? Because it sounds all too familiar. Because I was in Erasmus too.
okay, Université Lyon, Claude Bernard, Lyon 1.
No, no, a different one. But your
Okay.
French is perfect.
so, so yeah, I was in university there, and I must have done something right because at the end of my one of my modules, my professor offered me an internship at a company called Web Mechanic. These guys were based in Annecy, which is a lovely place in the mountains and just like 30 minutes drive outside of Lyon. So of course I said yes, sounds great. Give me a summer there for free. I love that. Eventually, those guys ended up recruiting me, and I went into the UK market with them. They were doing marketing automation at the time that HubSpot were just coming on the European scene, so we were directly competing with HubSpot. So we, I don't think I need to tell you who won that battle in
Right.
the end, but. Um, then with that same company, I moved to Berlin because Germany was a bigger market for us, and they were more susceptible to buy European-made solutions. It was there that I was contacted by a company called Celsi, who are the French leader of CRM and invoicing solutions. They do an all-in-one platform primarily targeting SMEs. Um, and then I was there. Worked in marketing initially, and then I moved up to manage the whole international development of the company after they raised Series A. And it was one afternoon. I think it was the middle of the year. The finance director, who was my direct boss, came up to me and asked, okay, we're doing, the mid year budget. We're just trying to figure out what's being spent. What software subscriptions have you got? I was like, I can remember the ones I put
A
in place, so
lot.
Calendly, Loom, whatever. Yeah, like I felt sort of like the whole world coming in because I'm a young guy trying to move his way up the career, really motivated, whatever. And I was like, you know what? Can I come back to you in a week? He's like, yeah, sure, but it's a bit weird. Okay. So I go speak to the accountant, and we start going through line by line of everything that they've assigned to my budget. And I found a Join Me subscription that I never took. It was the old manager. But suddenly we just forgot to remove that subscription once they left. We found subscriptions where nobody had access. We had subscriptions with seats everywhere. And I was like, okay, that's a problem. I've always had this sort of thing in my head that I wanted to try at least once to start a company. And I think it was a big enough problem and a big enough wake up call as a young, impressionable manager. They gave me enough motivation and stupidity to start License One. And it was also at Celsi then that I met my two co founders, Remy and Emilian, who were on the development team at that time. And those were the two guys that really took me under their wing as well. You know, like you said, the Scottish accent isn't easy. The Scottish culture isn't always compatible with France. But those two guys, they seemed to tolerate it and seemed to be as crazy enough as I was to start a company and go through all that sort of process. So that's how we ended up at this stage.
Cool. Okay, so you didn't understand each other at first, but then
Yeah, I had to learn some French.
they didn't really understand what you wanted, but they joined and just rolled with it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, great story. And I remember when I was just starting working in marketing, we one day I remember sitting at the table and just thinking, how awesome would it be to just have this one little tool that would help us, especially with onboarding, because
Yeah.
new people come and they don't know what we use and how we use it, if there is a tool available or not. Or like you said, one person left and then they never told you that there was a subscription that they were using, and I'm not using it anymore. So we just kind of roll with it and continue paying for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And just to add
Okay,
on,
so
we even see that. Sorry, I cut you off, but we even see that
sure.
across teams. It gets even worse. So we can see like development teams that love managing their projects in one tool, the marketing team in another tool, and the sales team in another tool. But functionally, they're pretty much all the same. They're just trying to verticalize their marketing. But if they regrouped all those subscriptions into one, they probably get bulk discounts by putting them everywhere. So it's not even just in one team. You go across the whole other teams and you realize actually there's silos in every single company. It's a headache. So I hope I picked a good business to start it in at least. Fingers crossed.
Yes, true. Okay, so how did you start the company, right? Well, you snatched two developers. Then
Yeah.
what did you do first?
Yeah, so that's not really the whole story in detail. So what I'd done was when I was still at Celsi, and everything was done manually at that time. So I asked them for their accounting exports, and I took an Excel sheet and I started going through it bit by bit and trying to analyze. Okay, how can I detect software? How can I detect recurring subscriptions? And before I even spoke to Emilian and Remy, my two co-founders, I said, okay, like if this problem exists for Celsius, it might just be that they have a problem, but it doesn't mean that that problem exists elsewhere.
True.
So I
Yeah.
started contacting a few other companies that existed from my old network from Web Mechanic, but also my new one with Celsius, and saying, hey, like I will do a software audit for you. I will sign your NDA. Give me a list of your accounting exports, and I'll go through them all, and then I'll save you money, and you can pay me a percentage of whatever I save you. Which, there's actually companies now that compete with us that are built on that model. So, which is quite funny. Um, and it turned out that it wasn't just Celsius that the problem was existing in. The problem was existing in marketing agencies of 40 people. It was existing in smaller, I saw an SME, which was like a sort of digital website agency, 10 people inside of it, because their problem was they were having freelancers coming in and out of the company, being attached to licenses, being removed, whatever. And when I started realizing that that problem existed, and it existed elsewhere, and the only criteria was that it was a digitalized industry that that company existed in. That's when I started to think, okay, how can we build this MVP? And to do that, I first solicited Emilian. I said, okay, like, hey, like, look, this is what I do. You're the genius that knows how to put code into something usable in a product that people love. Help me figure this out. Emilian worked up within the space of, I don't want to over or underestimate his abilities, but I think something that was presentable to clients was something about 2-3 months' work. and it failed completely. Horrible. Like that's got nothing to do with Emilian or me. It's just like
You really didn't overestimate his abilities here.
he's an amazing product manager. He's an amazing engineer. But the MVP, it was more a case of where we were trying to replicate the process that I was doing, rather than focusing on the problem and the perception of the problem that our users were having, which were two slightly different things. So we were optimizing the process of detecting software and then just highlighting all of the software where perhaps you've got inactive users, where really all our users wanted to do was save money. It was a level above that problem. We were just delivering the functionality, but we weren't delivering the solution to get there. And we still have a lot of work to get there. We're getting there. There's a lot of people that do save money with us, and we were already building that case. But that MVP stage was a big hit in the face. You consume podcast content, you read articles, you go to conferences, and you're like, yeah, build a scrappy MVP. People are going to pay for it, and then you're going to explode like Slack. Nah, it was a hit in the face. Nobody loved our MVP. Nobody loved our software for the first year it was even in production. There was always something wrong. Um, but then there was this sort of critical mass is probably the wrong word, but the snowball effect that happened, that we stopped turning into a feature factory and we started turning into a company that really wanted to figure out the problem in depth. We reorganized all of our processes internally, where instead of having a roadmap and a backlog, we had three separate sections. We have one, which is the roadmap, so what we're working on. Two, solutions, which are like the technical solutions we could have to things. And then problems, and problems are the high level statements. So problems would be like, I can't detect who is inactive on a software license, or when somebody leaves, I can't remove them from all my licenses. Typically, people would call them user stories, but semantically, we wanted to reposition it inside of the head of everybody in license one, saying that in fact, it's really easy to build SaaS in a way. You just need to refocus the problem on what are the problems, what are the solutions, how do we get them to the customer? And then very recently, we've also added a fourth step, which we call purgatory. And that's where everything that is put into production is then reevaluated over the coming 3 to 6 months to make sure that either that problem has been solved by what we put in as a solution, or if not, it's put back into the problem section and we need to fix that problem. So we've sort of changed philosophically from a development process to a problem solving process, even to the stage now that we don't call the development team, they're the problem solving team. Like that's what they do. Their role is solving problems for users.
Okay, very interesting. I'm detecting like every development team, right, has their own little tweaks to their processes, and that's how like they get their like internal names, right? So, for
Yeah.
example, when we're talking with DHH, right, from 37 Signals, they're like, oh no, just do whatever, but don't call us engineers. Then you're
Yeah.
you're problem solvers. So it's really funny, but you do the job. So um, first of all, what was the defining moment when you realized that you're not really doing things right? And did it come from customers, or did you just realize that since it's been a year, and we're
Yeah.
not making money and people are not very satisfied, then it's time to change something?
Yeah. What was the moment? That's a good question. I think the moment wasn't really a sort of big bang moment where it hit it at once. It was more of like a car crash in slow motion. If I was to give like some sort of nihilistic metaphor, um, it was more a case of like we kept on pushing hard and putting things into production hard, and we were running a playbook of getting users in by tempting them with this new features. People were coming in, and then their 7-day retention was dropping off. And I think it was just a moment of every 6 months we take what we call a breather, where we have 1 week where nobody does operational work. Everybody in the team is working on strategy. We're reflecting on what we've done the past 6 months, where the company's going, if all of our assumptions and hypotheses were correct. And I think that was probably more or less that period of that week where we started clicking on and saying, like, hey, maybe this approach of, just putting everything in production without, there was a strategy, but without problem solving. I think that was the point where we realized, okay, we need to sort of change philosophically this whole model of how we approach things. It came from a whole bunch of sources, that whole source of data points. It came from we don't do MPS, but customers weren't the great source, because customers are always going to say that they love your product. Or they're always going to say, yeah, I want that feature, and then you deliver
Sure.
that feature, and
Yeah.
then they don't use it. Where we were getting that data was more from Amplitude for tracking our in-app analytics, and we were seeing, okay, how often are people logging in? We're getting that obviously from MRR reporting. We use ChartMogul, so we saw that it wasn't going up despite us delivering everything that people told us they wanted. Um, that was it was a case of a whole amalgamation of multiple different feedback points telling us that either this isn't a viable business and the problem doesn't exist, but we'd already kind of validated the problem has existed, or that we weren't getting really good at solving it. And so we decided on the second one because, as sometimes as entrepreneurs do, you don't accept no as an answer, and you kind of continue for too long.
Right.
Well, that's what we done, but it wasn't too long. In the end, we ended up cracking the problem solving.
Cool. Okay, I feel like when you talk to customers, especially existing customers, that say we want this feature and we want this feature, and then you send them like a spreadsheet with all the features that they requested or somebody else requested, then every feature should have a price to it, and then whatever they ping as yes, build it. It should add to their existing pricing right away, even if it's not there. And then you see, if they're ready to pay for it right there, that moment. I guess it would be so much easier than I think for the founders, because if you cannot put the money um, right away into what you want in the
Mhm.
product, I think you don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to a certain extent. There's some areas where I wouldn't agree. I'm going to be annoying, but I wish I could agree with
Sure,
everything.
that's why
Um,
we're here.
there's one example that really annoys me a lot in SaaS pricing. Is normally SaaS sector really focuses a lot on repricing, pricing strategy. What's he called? Patrick Campbell, who does a lot of pricing optimizations, which is great. He's correct. Monetization of your company and your SaaS as soon as you hit a certain critical mass is really important. But I find that a lot of SaaS companies rather run out of a lot of ideas once they get into tiered pricing. And then they just start throwing spaghetti at the wall, thinking these are features that everybody that's a large company needs. And one of the things that I really hate, and I see it every single place that I look, is that you to have access to SSO, you need to pay for the enterprise plan. So I won't name companies in case they send their big legal teams against me, but I can advise your readers to go to a website which is called sso.tax. That's the website. It's an open source project where they've listed all the companies that are going to make you pay 5, 6, 7 times more just to have access to SSO, which is a very basic security need when you think about it. So I agree with your position in saying, okay, like if users are willing to pay more for the feature, then prioritize that. I'd be willing to pay more for SSO, but there's still an ethical question between ethical capitalism and then I suppose pure greed. And for me, SSO is a basic security need. I'm really annoyed. Please, if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, don't add SSO to your enterprise plan, please.
Okay, that's what I'm doing after this episode. I'll go crawling the internet, looking for this. But that's actually a very good point, and it was one of the questions that I put down for myself that I really, really wanted to ask. So, what about your pricing? And like you said, Patrick Campbell, and he actually came to SaaS Group couple of months ago to talk about pricing strategies. And Yeah, again, I'm with you. I kind of agree to disagree, right? Changing pricing makes sense when it makes sense. It's not just, let's test. Maybe people are going to pay more. Um, so, what about your pricing strategy? How did you determine it? Because, as far as I understand, you were also kind of under the radar for a couple of years, right? So, how did you price your product?
Yeah, so we started in the school of Patrick Campbell and the Bible of Prophet Well. So of course we done the Van Westendorp test of asking, our initial 10, 20 users, how much would you be willing to pay? How much is it too expensive, but you would still consider it, etc., etc. I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you already know what I'm talking about. The problem with those questions for us is we didn't have enough sample size, or at least retroactively looking back at it. I'm not sure that we had enough sample size. I think that type of test is probably better adapted to companies that, let's say, have 1,000 beta tester users rather than us who were posing those questions to 20. um, so that's how we got our initial pricing, was that we done that pricing sensitivity test, and on the bottom we built a chart where on the y-axis we had three different metrics that we tested, and then on the x-axis we had the number of employees in that company, I think, or something like that, I forget. Essentially, the end result was that the higher the person was willing to pay was more correlated with the amount of employees in the company, rather than the amount of subscriptions in their company or the spend in their company on software subscriptions. So that's how we found our pricing metric, and our initial pricing plan. We decided not to change our pricing yet. We're a business, we probably will change, and we do pricing tests every so often, but our pricing tests tend not to be about, you know, building a new pricing plan out or doubling pricing. They tend to be more around localizing pricing on the pricing page, maybe giving coupon codes to resolve pricing parity. Parity, I think it's called. Forget me. I'm not. Um, but this would be more of the type of pricing test we do. That's how we got to the pricing plan we're at right now. And we probably launch another questionnaire, and try and do some Van Westendorp experiments. I'm kind of hesitant though. I wonder what your opinion is, but I kind of get the feeling that sending a questionnaire out to people saying how much are you willing to pay for this product, especially now that the Van Westendorp test is so popular and so well known, kind of
Yeah.
seems like if I'm responding, I know that I'm going to respond with the lowest prices so that their data gets messed up and they give me the lowest price. Like it seems like a losing battle to pose that type of question to your customers.
True. No, I mean, this is such a sensitive thing, I think. Like if you are just starting, I think it's a good stuff like just to, and again, maybe you're not going to end up using it, right? But just to get an idea of what people think about your product. But I think the best test is just uh to offer a freemium for a couple of days and then, buy it. It's
Yeah,
like, of course, it depends on the product, right? And with license one, it has a longer adoption period, and it just takes longer to see the benefits, right? But if, say, I don't know, just Taplio, for example, comes to mind, right? One of the founders that came to the podcast, they put a price on it pretty much right away. And that's your best test, And if you're starting, yeah, maybe find out what people think about it. But I guess when you're growing, it's you can just test and see how people respond. But again, um I'm not sure I'm that familiar with what you're doing, like how
yeah,
you're working, but that comes back again to the fact that you were kind of hiding somewhere
yeah.
since launch. So why did you take on this strategy? How did it play for you, and why are you changing it now?
um, so I kind of. I'm inspired a lot by SaaS companies and SaaS founders that do things a little bit differently. I could cite in France Guillaume from Lemlist, but I could also
Yep.
cite the success cases of Notion, of Rippling, of Figma. Notion, for example, you can search on YouTube and see their demo from 2013. Uh, it is great for 2013, but I think a lot of people really forget that like Notion's been going for 10 years. Like we've had this very recent explosion of everybody and their mother using Notion and talking about it and
Yep.
them having billboards everywhere. But there was a good 4, 5, 6 years where that team was sitting down, headphones in, concentrating on building great product and not really caring so much about getting their brand out there. Uh, that type of model really inspires me a lot because I'm sort of this. I love using good products, and I would love to be in the position where, like the founders of Notion and Figma, etc., like people love using our products, and we get such a big advancement on our vision on a certain sector that we enjoy that position. So that's why we done that. We thought that we were with our network and with our current way of acquiring new users, we felt that we could get enough qualitative feedback and quantitative feedback by sort of going under the radar for a while. We didn't want to give all of our secrets away because we have some sort of different approaches towards the way we look at things and the way that we think the problem exists for people managing their software subscriptions. For example, you will never hear me say managing SaaS subscriptions, or you shouldn't. If you do, it's a mistake. And the reason we make that distinction is because from the people that we're speaking to, the only people that call them SaaS subscriptions are you and I. They're people in the SaaS industry. The majority of people that have the problem, though, they didn't even click that the software has moved onto the browser. They open up their
Right.
internet and then they just go onto a software. And this is that's only semantically a difference. But when you start thinking like that of what is the real problem, what are our persona, how do we respond to that? How do we make sure that this is a problem that is resolved not only by Anna in the marketing team, but Deborah in the HR team and Michael in the finance team and all of this? Then you start to think of building a cohesive product. And it's a vision that really needs to be done, in my opinion, 2, 3 years secret, let's say under the radar, and then once you've got your big product that people are already happy with, then you can start launching it into the world. But I don't think everybody had the facility to do what we done or we are doing. It wasn't an easy ride anyway. In either case, there was salaries cut at some point, and then salaries re-put on at some point. I think I lived on 6 months for like €200 a month. It wasn't an easy point to get to here,
Oh, wow.
um, but I think it's a necessary step to grow SaaS in this day and age. I think also continuing that thought, I think we've exited the stage. There's a great article. I forget the author's name, but I know it is the chief product officer of Webflow. It's called "Don't Serve Burnt Pizza," which is kind of a metaphor for our MVP. Essentially, the theory is if you make your MVP like a burnt pizza, you're not going to learn if people like pizza or not. You're just going to learn that they don't like pizza that's burnt. You need to make a really good product before you can really say that you tested that product. And so there's been this period, let's say 10 years ago, you could make a really scrappy MVP and people would buy it. And then you could go to investors and raise millions and build a great product. Now I think our standards are pretty high for software. Consumers buy, B2B consumers, B2B customers, especially towards the lower end, buy with a similar logic to consumers. And I think they've got standards that are a bit higher, even much higher than 10 years ago. So I think also before launching that first product and getting your name out there, you better be sure that at least it's good enough to stand, the initial critique that's going to come in from it.
Right. Okay. 100% agree. I actually have a funny comment about SaaS. I have a friend and she works in SaaS. And I went, once I started working for SaaS Group, uh, she came to me and she was like, okay, what's SaaS? and,
Yeah,
and I was
yeah.
like, well, yeah.
No, but this is it, and I think all of our competitors, they just didn't realize this, and they still don't. And I understand why, because that's what gets investors. But they're not thinking of their users first. When you think of your users first, you stop using SaaS. Simple.
Yeah. Right. Okay. But yeah, 100% agree with you. Now these stakes are way too high. Right. It's still like very inspiring to read a post on LinkedIn. Go out. If you're not ashamed of your MVP, then you're launching too late and stuff like that. And yeah, it's nice to think about it. You're this indie hacker just trying to
Mm,
to break into the industry, but I think now it's less and less, there are less and less stories of success of these kinds of products. It's mostly, you hear, especially, if you want to hear really a success story, then it
mm.
was a good product to start with.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, but just to add on, I would certainly say you can't build a product without having users in front of it. At least for us, we did have a sort of loyal 5, 10 customers that were using our like horrible version product, let's say. So I would just say to anybody listening, don't get the idea you can build a product just based on what you want. You definitely need your small little closed group of private alpha testers. Uh, so just to add that as
true.
an add-on.
Absolutely. But yeah, okay, it's great that you mentioned it. And that's also a great problem. It's great to hear, have customers before you have a product.
Mm.
Yeah, it's easily said than done. So, how did you find your first customers apart from, serving the company that you've been working with? Where did you get them?
Tenacity, determination, and impoliteness. It was a case of it was a case of when I was asking people to do the initial Excel sort of manual reports. After I'd done them, I said like, "Hey, look, I built a software. It's not in the best of stages, but could you test it out and see if also that works for you?" And then for those other people that I was looking for, I was asking everybody, handing business cards up everybody that I thought could, have a contact in there to say like, hey, we're looking for testers. Could you just test out the software? I know you're not the decision maker in the company. I don't care if you buy it. Just test it. Go on. See if my onboarding works correctly. See if the button makes sense to you. Whatever. We had like my mother tested the software, which it seems stupid in a way because she's not a SaaS buyer. She doesn't work in the industry. But if my software isn't simple enough to be understood by my mother, then we're making big mistakes along the way. So to
Good
get
point.
to get to those stages of at least those first testers and those first it was just a case of asking everybody, outreaching to people. Like I found one of our most loyal users is a finance director in a French startup. I just contacted them saying like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, I think I can solve your problem. Maybe not, I won't make you pay for it, at least not for the first few months. What do you think? Take 15 minutes, please. Something like, not begging in a way, but it's just a case of like, test my product. I feel like if you, I don't know if I could have, or if License One would even have been in that stage if I didn't at least have the mentality to start doing that. So that was the first part. And then once we have had got to that like 6, 7 month stage of having those initial test users, we started running a playbook of on LinkedIn and on Facebook groups for startups. We started running a playbook where every new feature became launched as, let's say, a beta feature. So I give you an idea. We launched a feature, it's a long time ago now, that detects how often employees log into software, or at least the last time they logged into one of their software subscriptions, because obviously that's one of the leading causes of wasted money. Somebody you pay monthly, but they don't
Right.
log in. Instead of saying License One just launched this new feature, come and test it out, we posted saying on my LinkedIn and on these Facebook groups, hey, just launched a new product that's going to detect all of the times that your employees have logged in. We're looking for new beta users. Leave a comment below. And just that mental positioning changing from we've got a new feature to we're building a new product made us touch multiple different personas across all of these different groups, all these French startups or on my LinkedIn. And then we could also test as well in a limited way the popularity of each of those feature sets, because if more people signed up for the the activity tracking feature versus, let's say, the software spend tracking feature, then of course we know which one we should have put more energy into. But again, the problem there was
Right.
that we kind of became a feature factory, and it became some sort of hedonic treadmill where we were like, how do we get a new post? How do we get more traction? Let's go make more features. So double-edged sword. You need to be really careful of that if you're going to copy that playbook.
Right. You kind of adopted the product hunt setting and made your LinkedIn into your product hunt.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
we still haven't
So
launched on
why
Product
not
Hunt.
product hunt?
Yeah, we still haven't. We still haven't. The
There you go.
reason we didn't launch on Product Hunt is because for I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pitch license one a tiny bit. The way we detect
Sure.
software is multiple different ways. So we either detect it through bank accounts, and so we can detect bank accounts in the whole of every European country. We can detect from bank accounts in the USA and in Canada, but we can't detect bank accounts in India because they don't have enough open banking regulation to allow us to do that. So we would need to then detect software payments from accounting software, but we don't have enough accounting software integrations yet to make it worthwhile to go onto Product Hunt. Um, so it's kind of useless to launch onto Product Hunt and say like, oh, we only work for European and US users. I mean, there's a lot of companies that do that, but we are kind of, unfortunately or fortunately, localized in the sense that we can only really target the EU and US customers, or North American customers at the moment. But we're probably going to go on Product Hunt sometime in the next 12 months. We think we'll be adding a few more accounting software integrations that should be able to handle the other international audiences. So that's probably in the pipeline. It's just not yet, and it took a lot of work to get to that stage.
All right. Well, I'll make sure to upvote you guys. So, what changed in your customer acquisition strategy from going into personal emails to doing what? Because like I said, I do my research before I start every podcast, and I haven't found much about you. I mean, there is the website, there
Yeah,
is one podcast that you did,
yeah.
but that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, what changed in our acquisition strategy is that we're just starting it up. Before, our acquisition strategy was focused on acquiring new feedback rather than acquiring new customers. There's a philosophical change between those two. And although there's a lot of people that will say, make your first feedback customers pay, I agree with that, sure, but that wasn't our focus. We're in a growth stage. We want as much feedback as we can so that when we start acquiring customers, they're going to convert at an exceptionally high rate. So what's changed now is pretty much we have budget to put into acquisition channels. We've got a fifth team member coming in June that is going to be full time on SEO and all of that good stuff. There's going to be the classic playbook for B2B SaaS companies. I don't want to go in too much detail into the strategy there, but SEO is not going to be massive for us anyway. And that's it. The thing that's changed is that now we're actually going to start looking to acquiring customers rather than acquiring feedback from potential customers, which is philosophically, again, it's just a different thing. And that means that also my role has changed. Whereas before I was more in a, let's say, strategic role, making sure, first of all, the company had enough money to survive and we didn't die next week. And also being the sort of product management manager, designer role. That has now been taken over by my other co-founder, and then now I'm going more into the marketing and sales side as well. So each project is, in my opinion, sort of has this sort of different stages. The company license one needed me to be the product manager, the sort of sales acquisition-y guy, even though we weren't selling so much, and the customer support, whatever. Now that's being a bit more delegated to my other co-founders. I'm on acquisition for clients, and so is this our fifth team member that's joining us in June.
Okay. All right. So, buckle up. An impolite question is coming.
Oh,
How are you guys able to afford it? Like, do you have some massive clients that are paying you? 10 figures a month? Or is it like, you know, 1 or 2 figures a month? Like, how are you guys able to afford it? Like, do you have some massive clients that are paying you 10 figures a month? Or is it like, you know, 1 or 2 figures a month? um, big money for what you're doing, or are you funded? Because again, I couldn't find any information about that. Are you bootstrapped? Are you a millionaire?
It all comes
What's
from drug money. Drug money.
okay?
No, no,
There
no.
you go. I knew it.
The company started with some love money from uh, from two ex colleagues, and then obviously then me and my co-founders took out a small loan, something like 50K, 60K, whatever. And then we also got some public funding, which helped us maintain for a certain while, license one, and that helped us get things off the racks and at least get us up to year 1.5, year two, and then that's it. That's our financing up to now.
Okay, interesting. Right. So, you can say you were bootstrapped, right?
Kind of. I mean, this is where, like, for me, bootstrapped is such an ambiguous term nowadays. Because as far as I'm concerned, most companies, if not all SaaS companies, were bootstrapped to a certain extent. It just depends where you put the cursor on bootstrapped. So, like, of course,
True. Yeah.
everybody's bootstrapped until they get their first investment round. Lemlist, who created this whole bootstrap phase, I don't know if it went worldwide, but at least in France, a lot of people rallied behind this bootstrap sort of messaging. Just accepted fundraising. I think it was at this end of last year or something like that for 20 million. It was only on secondary. I don't think there was a lot of primary investment. Um, I think every company should be just thinking about capital efficiency. Point. I don't care if we're bootstrapped. I don't care if we raise money from investors. The only thing I care about is making sure that SMEs stop wasting money on software subscriptions. Whatever we need to do to get to that point, I will do it. So I bootstrapped or not, who cares?
Right. Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, as far as you run a good, healthy company that helps others, yeah, nobody cares. But okay, so what was the so far the biggest learning point for you? Like, what was the aha moment that just opened up your eyes and maybe made you pivot, or um, I don't know, a turning point?
There's been a few. How much time have you got? there's um, there was one, that at least I'm only speaking personally here, but it wasn't for the whole company. Um, but there's this sort of hypothesis that sort of I've pushed on the rest of the company, admittedly, since the beginning, is that the SMEs have a problem, and it's not being solved by any of our competitors, and also our competitors don't give two shits about them. Sorry for the language, but they don't care about SMEs. Big companies bring too much money to them in terms of revenue, and when they accept external investors, they only care about ARPA. So why go down hill when you're already going up? And it was something that really I like. As I think every SaaS founder puts themselves under a lot of questions, and they start to think, not imposter syndrome, but you would start to think, okay, like, is this the right direction? And then, is this really the right theory? Should we not just be copying our competitors because they seem to be making a success of it? And it was there was a moment, something like 7-8 months ago, where we started to speak to already a couple of failed founders who used to be competitors of ours but ended up failing along the way. When we started to speak to a few investors who VC investors who were following the sector, and then speaking around and getting a bit more, what was it, a bit more external feedback on finally that vision that we kind of tried to keep secret for a long time. I started to realize that sometimes I have the right idea. And it's a weird thing to say, because I'm always coming along with sort of like these, having an idea, and it's not just me, my co-founders are the same. We say, okay, like, this is what we think is correct, but then it's sort of like the scientific approach of trying to prove ourselves wrong. It's like, no, it can't be correct. What about this? What about that? What about the other
Right.
thing? And
Just
mentally
a gut
something
feeling.
shifted. Yeah, it's a gut feeling, or you're making decisions with limited information. And there was something about 6, 7 months ago that just clicked after getting all of this external validation from customers, from investors, from failed competitors, unfortunately, who were really nice guys as well. Uh, that actually something clicked in my mind and said, like, maybe not every idea that I or the rest of the company has should be put in question. Maybe just what we should be doing is going full steam ahead on those ideas until we hit the brick wall, rather than trying to make the brick wall come to us before we even hit it. I don't know how to put a metaphor that sounds nice on it, but that was at least one of the big learning curves. I think the other one, but it's such a stupid one because like everybody speaks about it. It's like it's delegate, it's
Feel
speak
it.
to your co-founders want to do stuff as well. And I was taking a lot of stuff on my own shoulders for the first year, even further. Um, and delegation sounds like something that would happen, I suppose, in this hierarchical structure from a manager to the rest of their team. For me, it was a case of like I was doing way too many things, and it wasn't until my co-founders like sort of took me aside and said like, "Hey, like, listen, it's cool that you're doing all those things, but like we also kind of want to do some of those things too." I was like, why didn't you ask before? It's like, well, because you were kind of like really head down. And the reason I say it's stupid is because it's like one podcast and three or four is going to say that's what you should be doing. But something just didn't click in my head to say, or our head really, to say at the very beginning, like, okay, what do we want to do now? What do we want our jobs to look like in 6 months, 1 year's time? And how are we going to reevaluate that between us along the way? So, and I think also one doing that, like, it's insane that both those co-founders that have started assuming jobs that I used to do are doing them 10 times better than what I ever done, which is, even better. And also it makes me look hella stupid, but whatever. Those are two of the learning curves, I suppose, I could try and give you at least.
Well, but that's cool. I think it's so important, actually. And like you said, it's just so, it kind of presumed that it's a natural way to just talk and just assume that that people don't that people want to do what they are doing because they're developers, they want to program, or because they're marketers, they want to market. And it's just um like we were talking with I think that was Rent Fishkin, yeah, and we were talking about products, and what he said is like the biggest problem that they're facing right now is that their users don't convert. And the reason behind it, and that's what they're realizing, is that they simply don't know. No one's showing them how something works because they assumed that it's just so easy. And you should never assume, that people know what they're doing, or they do what they want. You should always talk with the people that you work with. I would never be doing a podcast is if I was listening to people telling me what to do, right? I just
Yeah,
came to them and said, hey, that would be nice to do a podcast, and
yeah.
here we are. But yeah, absolutely, that's beautiful, and thank you for reminding about it. So just a couple more questions. And first one, kind of in the same area. What was the biggest win and the biggest failure so far for a company, or maybe for you as the founder?
Biggest win for the company and founder, biggest fail for the company and founder. Forgive me, you might have to edit this out, but I want to think because I don't want to give the biggest win to something and then later think about something afterwards.
Sure.
Um,
Take your time.
I think the biggest win for the company was probably there was the we done a launch on AppSumo, which is a software marketplace. If your users don't know, essentially you list your software on there. People come and they will buy lifetime access to your software for a very low price. Um, and the idea is you use that to then get as much feedback from them as possible. But also, it's a very international audience. So we were bringing on users from the US, from India, from Cambodia, from Brazil, from every country in the world. I think we've now got users in over 38 countries in the world right now. Um, that moment itself wasn't the big success, in my opinion. It was certainly a success, but there was really this moment of the champagne bottle popping. It wasn't metaphorically, in the sense that once that was happening, there was this case of like the whole team coming together. We had one of my co-founders that was a new dad, like his child was born literally a month before that launch, so he still wasn't having good sleep. Even today, it's still difficult. I'm not revealing too much personal information, but I think the big win
The
for the
child
company,
is
at least.
18 already, but
Yeah, yeah. This moment of like where the whole four of us came through and we were like, okay, now we're going to do night shifts because we were getting support requests left, right, and center, maintaining so that the software was staying up. Because once you get a mass of users coming on and testing and synchronizing software, and then everything was going wrong, but everything was going right at the same time. At least for me, when I look back, that was one of those big successes. But I don't know if it's the biggest success. We've had another few. We launched an advent calendar for French SaaS companies. We ended up doing a co-partnership with a guy called Jens Polonsky in Cologne last year, where like behind every door there's a new deal on a SaaS subscription, and we ended up getting a ton of
cool.
visitors. Like the first year we had something like 10, 15,000 visitors, and we spent zero on acquisition, zero on marketing. It was just co-marketing action for fun. So at least for the company, those would probably be the two, I suppose. Yes, the other ones is making Remy, our third co-founder. He was a late co-founder, so I suppose the other big one is that he ended up being crazy enough to join us. So that would be a big one. And for the low times in the company, would probably be having to cut salary. Like having to cut salary also, we can't cut salary for employees, full-time employees, but cutting salary between co-founders. It's always a difficult moment in time, but it's always difficult, especially when, like I mentioned, you've got co-founders that have got other sort of responsibilities at home. And it's also when you realize how well you've chosen your co-founders and how well your co-founders have chosen their family, when you realize that cutting salary, although it's a horrible experience to go through, you understand that their wife or their husband's 100% behind them, that you understand that your co-founder's not blaming you because you're already blaming yourself enough, and then you sort of like you're all in that deep end together. But I certainly remember that being the darkest days of License One, where we're like, okay, sorry guys, like if we pay ourselves more money, License One doesn't exist. We're going to have to find ways to pay your rent and whatever, and I'm going to have to find ways to pay my rent in another way. Those were the darkest days of the company, darkest days for me too. And yeah, that's probably how I'd summarize it all up.
Okay, all right, and it tells a lot about you as a founder and your team. About when you said, we only cut our salaries, not our employees, which is an absolutely amazing approach, and doesn't happen as often as one would want to. But
Yeah. I mean, the good thing is we were in
that's another
France, so
story.
I mean, if we wanted to cut the salaries, what it would be is we'd end up firing employees, and we only have one at the moment. And I think everybody can empathize with the idea that when you're such a small team, it's sort of a case of like if you lose that guy, it's like losing a brother. Now we're such a small team, we take the sacrifice. He keeps his salary. That's not us being nice. That's just us being normal. Like, that's
Cool.
that's normal.
Okay. Amen. All right. And just one more question. And this is something about the trends, in SaaS industry, or just in the whole software world. So everyone's crazy about AI, especially ChatGPT. What do you think about it? Are you leveraging it for the company somehow? And are you planning to introduce some kind of AI anything in license one?
We're not planning on putting AI in at the moment, but we do use AI, or at least I use ChatGPT. When I'm writing, like I'm sort of this in terms of writing, I'm this discombobulated type writer. I have sort of like 100 different ideas, but which is really or different clauses, but which is difficult for me is to make them go through with like a consistent paragraph so that it makes sense and it flows like most people normally write. So ChatGPT helps me out a lot in there, and ChatGPT also helps me out a lot when reviewing legal paperwork, especially when it's in French. Because what it will do is I can copy and paste the legal tech work in there, and then I will ask ChatGPT a question like, "Hey, how does this cover reverse vesting? Give me a summary in English," and then it will translate and give me a summary. Like, great tool, at least for the iteration right now. I use it every day or two. Where do I see it going? I mean, I don't even think I'm qualified enough to know. I think there's what's surprising to me is there's a lot of tools being built off of their AI, and they're just working on one prompt. I hesitate to say, but I think Copy AI use ChatGPT's model or OpenAI's model. Sorry, but did I say OpenAI? No, I meant what's it called?
Copy AI.
Copy AI, that's the one I meant.
Yeah.
You know exactly who I'm talking about. There's I think email writers using their models or they're using Jasper. Like there's a lot of writing tools that are based on these API access models. I'm interested to see the end result for where that gets to because I don't know how like writing tools. I don't see how they're all going to merge together if functionally the quality of the writing is all going to be more or less the same. But again, I think I'm just speaking nonsense. I don't know enough about AI. Um, if I were to hesitate, a yes, I would say the biggest change is going to be that forget all of the innovation that OpenAI and Google and all that are doing. I think probably the biggest innovations are going to be coming from companies like Hugging Face, and we have a company in France called Icomia, IKOMIA, who help developers deploy all of those open source AI algorithms. I think that's probably going to be the real thing that's going to help AI explode to the maximum. Is that nobody's going to be really dependent on OpenAI or any other company. They're going to find an easy, cheap, affordable way to successfully launch either on their own computers or on their own servers AI algorithms and apply them to all their side projects or all their real projects. I'd probably say that's where this sector is going to be going.
Interesting. That's a new one. Okay, so that's why the podcast is here, to see, because you all brilliant people, founders, come here, to share your opinions, and that's why it's so interesting. Because yeah, sure, no one really knows where ChatGPT will take us, right? But it's interesting to to assume and see, because again, I never knew about the companies that you just mentioned, right? Something for me to Google today. So thanks for sharing. All right,
Anytime.
well, Jonathan, it's been amazing talking with you. I absolutely loved learning about license one. Still have to go and see and maybe try for myself what it does, and if we at SaaS Group can also leverage it for ourselves. But yeah, thanks for telling this story.
Thanks again for having me, Anna.
Thank you so much. All right, and take care.
Bye bye.